Have you ever wondered what secrets lie hidden in the misty corners of Middle-earth? Tonight, we walk alongside Gandalf the Grey as he moves silently through ancient forests, his staff casting a soft glow against the shadows. The air hums with whispers, the voices of trees that have stood for centuries, guarding mysteries even the wisest have forgotten. But he is not alone. Unseen eyes follow his every step, and the weight of his mission grows heavier with each passing moment. What forgotten truths is he seeking, and who or what waits just beyond the veil of twilight? This is the unseen journey of Gandalf the Grey, a tale woven with magic, danger, and the quiet power of a wanderer who walks where few dare to tread. Before we go further, tell us where in the world are you joining us from tonight? And as the stars begin their watch, what hour has settled over your corner of the earth? Let us know in the comments below. Together, let's step into the unknown. The gnarled roots of the ancient oak twist beneath Gandalf's boots like the fingers of a slumbering giant, and for a moment, even the wind holds its breath. The bark beneath his fingertips thrums with a slow, deep pulse, the heartbeat of the forest itself. Soft murmurs slither through the leaves, not in words, but in something older, something that speaks directly to the marrow of his bones. Beware the shadow without a shape, they seem to say. It walks where the moon's light does not reach. His staff dims in response, as if even its magic hesitates here. Somewhere beyond these trees, the ruins of Arnor crumble silently, their stones whispering of kings long dust and a darkness that did not die with them. The choice gnaws at him. Turn back and carry the forests, warning to those who still listen, or step into the ruins where answers, and far worse things, may be waiting. The weight of centuries presses down, and in the hush, Gandalf the Grey does something even the wisest rarely dare. He listens. The parchment crackles between Gandalf's fingers, brittle with age, as if the very words might crumble into dust before he can unravel their meaning. The mark of Isildur, a sigil once wielded by the last king to hold the One Ring, glares up at him like an accusation. The ink is faded, but the urgency in its strokes remains, a desperate warning scratched onto the page centuries ago. Beneath the third moon of harvest, it begins, when the shadow swallows its own tail. A chill threads through the air, unrelated to the wind. The ruins around him, silent a moment before, now seem to hum with a low, malevolent energy. Then comes the sound boots, scraping against broken stone, the wet snarl of orcish breath. They emerge from the skeletal arches like rats, from a flood, yellow eyes glinting in the dim light. Gandalf's grip tightens around his staff. To flee now would mean losing this fragile piece of history, this clue to a danger older than the ruins themselves. But to fight, the odds whisper against him. The scroll's final words burn in his mind. What was sundered must never again be whole. A choice, then not just between fight or flight, but between the past's buried truths and the future's gathering storm. The first orc lunges, rusted blade raised, and in that heartbeat, the gray wizard does not hesitate. His staff flares like a fallen star, casting long shadows that dance with the ghosts of Arnor. The clash of steel rings through the ruins as Gandalf whirls, his staff cutting arcs of white fire through the choking dark. The orcs snarl and recoil, but their leader, taller than the rest and crowned with jagged iron, steps forward with a blade blackened by more than forged smoke. It drinks in the light of Gandalf's magic, like a parched throat gulping water, leaving only coldness in its wake. A curse older than the fall of Arnor clings to that metal, and when it grazes the wizard's arm, the pain is sharp enough to steal his breath. The scroll in his robes suddenly feels heavier, its fragile secrets pressing against his ribs. This is no random ambush, he realizes. They came for the parchment. They know. With a roar, he slams his staff downward, and the earth itself heaves in response. Stones erupting, dust swirling into a blinding veil. In the chaos, he glimpses the orc leader's enraged snarl before vanishing into the night. The forest swallows him whole, its branches knitting tight behind like a living shield. Blood trickles warm down his sleeve, but the true wound is the dread coiling in his gut. That blade should not exist, and if the enemy has rediscovered such forgotten arts, then the scroll's warning is already unfolding. Somewhere ahead, the ragged peaks of the misty mountains claw at the sky. Beyond them, Rivendell and hope, but the night is long, and the shadows between here and there stir with more than just the wind. The narrow path winds deeper into the valley, where the very air thickens with the scent of pine and the faintest whisper of elf song. Gandalf's breath comes ragged, his arm throbbing where the cursed blade bit deep, but the scroll, oh, the scroll burns hotter than fever against his chest. The trees here part reluctantly, their roots coiling like sentinels, until suddenly the ground gives way to a clearing bathed in silver light. Figures materialize from the shadows, their bows drawn, arrows tipped with starlight. Halt, wanderer, their captain commands, voice smooth as a blade's edge. None pass without surrendering what they carry. Gandalf's fingers twitch toward the scroll, not out of fear, but of knowing. These elves are not of Rivendell. Their sigils bear the mark of a forgotten house, one that vanished when Arnor fell. To hand over the parchment would be to trust ghosts with a secret that could break the world anew. Yet their arrows do not waver, and time is a luxury he no longer has. With a slow exhale, he meets the captain's gaze. What if I told you this scrap of vellum holds the key to what your ancestors died hiding? The elves exchange glances, their suspicion as sharp as their blades. The wind stirs, carrying the faintest echo of a name lost to history, and in that moment, the gray wizard gambles everything on a single truth. Even the most guarded hearts still remember how to fear. The fire crackles low between them, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled elves. Gandalf unrolls the brittle parchment with deliberate care, its edges flaking like autumn leaves. Look here, he murmurs, tracing a faded rune with his finger. A hammer crossed with a sword, the ancient emblem of an oath, sworn in fire and blood. This marks the last pact between Durin's folk and the men of Arnor. Forgotten by histories, but not by the stones that bore witness. The elf captain stiffens, his silver brows knitting together. Impossible. Our elders spoke of no such alliance. A murmur ripples through the circle, but one figure remains still. An archer near the back, his fingers tightening imperceptibly around the shaft of an arrow. Gandalf continues, voice dropping to a hush. They mine something deep beneath the mountains, not mithril, something darker, and they bound it with spells so potent, even the earth itself was sworn to silence. The wind shifts abruptly, snuffing out the fire's last ember. In the sudden dark, a rustle of movement too quick for mortal eyes, followed by the whisper of fleeing footsteps. When the flames sputter back to life, the scroll is gone. The elf captain snarls a command, but Gandalf is already moving, his staff illuminating bootprints pressed into the dew-damp grass. They lead not toward the wilds, but deeper into the Elvish encampment, and in that terrible moment, the truth settles like winter frost. The enemy has been among them all along. The chase begins in silence, beneath stars that no longer seem to shine, only watch. The fog coils around Gandalf's legs like a living thing, thick and clammy, swallowing sound and sight alike. His breath rasps in his throat, each step heavier than the last, but the glow of his staff refuses to die. Ahead, a flicker of movement, a cloak snapping like a wounded wing as the thief darts between the trees. Then a misstep. The figure stumbles, and for a heartbeat, the hood falls back. Gandalf freezes. The face staring back at him is one he last saw laughing over a shared fire in Rivendell, decades ago. Círdan's apprentice, the promising young scholar who once begged for stories of the elder days. Now his eyes burn with a hunger no lore could satisfy, fingers clutching the stolen scroll like a talisman. "You don't understand," the elf gasps, backing away. "They promised me the answers, the true history." The words hit Gandalf like a physical blow. This isn't mere theft. It's betrayal woven from desperation, from the oldest lie, that some secrets are worth any price. The staff's light wavers as the elf raises a dagger, not to strike, but to press against the scroll's edge. A silent threat. One slash and centuries of warning could become dust. Gandalf's hand trembles, not from fatigue, but from the terrible choice before him. To fight would risk destroying the very thing he seeks to save. Yet to yield, that might doom more than parchment. The mist closes in, and in that suffocating silence, the Grey Wizard does the unthinkable. He lowers his staff. "Then tell me," he says softly, "what is it you think you know?" And for the first time, the elf hesitates. The stone beneath Gandalf's feet groans as the bridge shudders, loose pebbles tumbling into the abyss below. The elf stands at the precipice, one hand gripping the scroll, the other holding a blade poised to tear it apart. The wind howls between them, carrying the scent of damp earth and something sharper, fear, or perhaps desperation. "You think this parchment holds wisdom?" the betrayer shouts, voice cracking like dry kindling. "It's a shackle, a chain meant to bind us to the mistakes of the dead." Gandalf's fingers tighten around his staff, not in anger, but in sorrow. He knows this ache, the hunger for answers so fierce it blinds. The scroll's edges flutter in the gale, its ancient ink whispering of horrors buried beneath mountain roots. To let it burn might spare the elf his folly, but to lose its warnings, the cost would echo through ages. The Grey Wizard exhales, and in that breath, he makes his choice. Not force, not surrender, something far more dangerous. He steps forward, empty hands raised. "Then tell me," he says, voice softer than the wind, "what would you have written in its place?" The question hangs between them, heavy as a hammer stroke. For the first time, the elf's grip falters. His blade wavers, and in that fragile moment, the bridge gives way. The bridge collapses in a roar of splintered wood and shattered stone, and for a heartbeat, time itself seems to fracture. Gandalf lunges forward, fingers brushing empty air as the scroll spirals into the abyss, its brittle pages fluttering like wounded birds. The betrayer's eyes widen in horror, his defiance crumbling with the planks beneath his feet. Instinct screams at Gandalf to turn away, to let the fall claim its due. But wisdom has never bowed to instinct. With a surge of power that burns through his bones, he thrusts his staff downward. A golden thread of magic lashes out, coiling around the elf's wrist just as the last stone gives way. The force nearly wrenches Gandalf's arm from its socket, pain screaming up his shoulder, but he holds fast. Below, the scroll vanishes into the hungry dark, its secrets swallowed whole. The elf dangles, his sneer stripped bare, replaced by something far worse, understanding. Gandalf's grip trembles not from strain, but from the terrible clarity of this moment. The parchment was never the trial. It was the weight of mercy, the choice to reach out even as betrayal still smoldered in the air. Slowly, agonizingly, he hauls the elf back to solid ground. The silence between them is thick enough to carve. When the elf finally speaks, his voice is raw. "You should have let me fall." Gandalf studies his own blistered palms, the scorch marks where magic and mortality met. "No," he murmurs, "but you should have known I wouldn't." Somewhere in the depths, the last remnants of Arnor's warning settle among the bones of older, fouler things. And above them, two enemies neither sure who just saved whom stand in the gathering dark, listening to the wind carry away what might have been the end of everything. Dawn breaks over the misty mountains like a slow exhale, painting the peaks in hues of rose and gold, but Gandalf feels none of its warmth. The road to Rivendell stretches before him, each step heavier than the last. The loss of the scroll gnaws at him, not just its secrets, but the cost of preserving them. A wizard's pride is a dangerous thing, and in the quiet of the wilderness, he lets himself taste the bitterness of failure. What good is foresight if it arrives too late? The wind carries no answers, only the distant cry of a hawk circling high above the valley. Then a sound, not the rustle of leaves or the babble of a stream, but the deliberate crunch of boots on gravel. A figure emerges from the shadow of a crumbling watchtower, cloaked in travel-worn gray, his face obscured by a hood. Yet the way he carries himself, the quiet assurance of his stride, sends a flicker of recognition through Gandalf's weary bones. The ranger pauses, as if sensing the weight of the wizard's gaze, and when he pushes back his hood, the years fall away like shed leaves. Aragorn, not the king he will one day be, but the man he is now, a wanderer, a keeper of forgotten roads, and perhaps a sign. "Strange paths we walk, Mithrandir," the ranger says, his voice rough with dust and distance. He reaches into his cloak, and for a heartbeat, Gandalf's breath catches. The fragment of parchment in Aragorn's hand is small, brittle at the edges, but the script upon it is unmistakable. The same hand, the same warning. "Found this near the ruins of Enuminas," Aragorn murmurs. The rest was lost. The word lingers between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Lost but not gone, not yet. Gandalf studies the ranger's face, the sharpness of his gaze, the quiet resolve, and something kindles in his chest, fragile but bright. Hope, yes, but more than that. The certainty that some threads of fate cannot be severed, no matter how shadowed the road. Aragorn does not know the full weight of what he carries. But he will. Together, beneath the eaves of Rivendell's twilight halls, the last fragments of Arnor's legacy will find their voice. The wizard smiles, just slightly, and rests a hand on the ranger's shoulder. "Come," he says. "The elves keep better wine than either of us have tasted in many a long year." And with that, two travelers turn their steps eastward, where the evening star already glimmers above the hidden valley. The firelight flickers low between them, casting long shadows that twist like restless spirits across the ruins of their makeshift camp. Aragorn smooths the fragment of parchment across his knee, its edges frayed from years tucked into the folds of his cloak. "This mark," he murmurs, tracing a symbol so faded it seems to bleed into the page, "is no king's seal. It's a key." Gandalf leans in, the weight of centuries pressing behind his eyes as he studies the looping script. Not the flowing hand of elves, nor the blunt strokes of dwarves, but something older, sharper. The script of Celebrimbor himself. A breath hisses between his teeth. Eregion. The word hangs in the air like a struck bell. Aragorn nods, his face unreadable in the dim light. The library of Austin-Edhill, lost when the shadow first fell. The silence stretches, thick with unspoken dread. Even now, centuries later, few dare whisper that name aloud. The city where the rings of power were forged, where the earth itself still remembers the screams. Gandalf's fingers tighten around his staff. They say the ruins crawl with more than memory. That the very stones hunger. Aragorn's smile is thin, devoid of mirth. "Good thing we've brought our own appetites, then." He reaches into his pack, withdrawing a second scrap. This one singed at the edges, as if snatched from a fire. The script is different, jagged where the other was graceful, but the message is unmistakable, a map or the ghost of one. The two fragments fit together like broken teeth, revealing not a path, but a warning. A single word, repeated in blood-red ink. Awake, the wind shifts, carrying the scent of damp earth and something metallic, something alive. Somewhere in the dark beyond the fire's reach, a branch snaps. Too loud, too deliberate. Aragorn's hand drifts to his sword hilt. We aren't the only ones who have been hunting. Gandalf doesn't answer. His gaze is fixed on the fragments, on the way the firelight makes the ink seem to writhe. This isn't just history. It's a riddle carved in the bones of the world, and the answer, when it comes, will cost more than parchment. The air inside the ruins of Austin-Edhill is thick with the taste of burnt parchment and old magic, clinging to Gandalf's throat like a warning. The walls, once lined with the wisdom of ages, now lean inward as if whispering secrets to one another. Aragorn's torch sputters against the darkness, casting erratic shadows that twist into shapes too deliberate to be chance. A hand here, a face there, all gone in the blink of an eye. The floor groans underfoot, tiles shifting like the pieces of some ancient game, and Gandalf knows better than to trust the path behind them. Traps here are not mere mechanisms. They are memories given teeth, illusions with weight enough to break bones. Ahead, the corridor opens into a chamber where the dust has settled into perfect stillness. Books line shelves untouched by time, their spines gleaming with faint, eerie luminescence. Yet it's the figure at the center that stills Gandalf's breath, a specter draped in robes woven from shadow and ink, its fingers long as quills, its face a shifting blur of forgotten scribes. The guardian does not speak, not at first. Instead, it extends a hand, palm upturned, and the very air thrums with a single, unspoken demand: trade. Aragorn stiffens beside him. What does it want? Gandalf exhales slowly. The answer coils in his chest, cold and certain. A memory, one of mine, the specter's gaze, if it can be called, that fixes on him, and suddenly the weight of centuries presses down, not as burden, but as currency. Which moment does he sacrifice? The laughter of hobbits in Bilbo's sunlit kitchen, the first time he held Narya's flame, its warmth a promise against the coming dark. Or deeper still, the face of his master, now lost to the tides of time, whose last words to him were not wisdom, but a question: will you remember enough to forgive yourself? The guardian's hand remains outstretched. Time here is not linear. It is a tapestry, and every thread pulled loose unravels more than it seems. Aragorn's fingers brush his elbow, silent, steady. A reminder, the present has its own price. With a breath that feels like surrender, Gandalf reaches into the folds of his mind and offers up a memory, not of joy, nor of sorrow, but of silence. The hush between the notes of the music, the moment before creation itself, drew breath. The specter's fingers close around it, and the chamber trembles. The books sigh open, their pages glowing with script that writhes like living things. Yet as the guardian steps aside, its voice finally slithers into Gandalf's mind, thin and mocking. You think you have paid in full. But some debts echo. The words linger, sharp as a splinter, as the first tome floats into his waiting hands. Its title, etched in gold, makes his blood run cold. What the rings remember. The memory burns away like parchment in a flame, leaving behind the acrid sting of loss, not just of the moment itself, but of the person he was when he first stepped onto Middle-earth shores. The weight of his own naivety lingers like a phantom limb, yet as the scribe's fingers uncurl, the chamber dissolves into a swirl of ink and shadow, reforming into a scene so vivid it steals his breath. A circle of figures, hooded and silent, gathered beneath the skeletal branches of a dead oak. Elves, yes, but also dwarves with axes strapped across their backs, and men whose cloaks bear the sigil of a forgotten house. Their voices rise in a chant older than kingdoms, weaving a spell not of domination, but of surrender, a pact to bury something so deep, even the stars would forget its name. The vision pulses with urgency, the words clawing at Gandalf's mind. When the three become seven, the chains will break. Then, like mist before the sun, it's gone. The scribe's laughter rasps through the void left behind, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone. You see, it hisses. Even now, the threads fray. Gandalf staggers, the chamber tilting around him, his staff the only anchor to reality. Aragorn's grip is firm on his arm, but the ranger's eyes betray his own shock. 3 become 7, he murmurs. The rings, the question hangs between them, taut with dread. Gandalf wants to deny it, to dismiss the riddle as some trick of fading magic. But the vision clings like a burr, its truth undeniable. The last alliance was never the only one, and whatever they buried beneath that oak wasn't meant to stay buried. The scribe's form flickers, its edges unraveling into tendrils of smoke. You've paid, it concedes, but the ledger is never balanced. With a final hollow laugh, it dissolves, leaving behind only the echo of its warning and the sudden, sickening realization The memory Gandalf surrendered wasn't chosen at random. It was the one he could least afford to lose. Somewhere in the void between past and present, a door clicks shut, and the key is gone. Aragorn exhales sharply, turning the riddle over in his mind like a blade testing its edge. 3 becomes 7. It can't mean the rings themselves, their numbers were always fixed. Gandalf's fingers tremble against his staff, unless it speaks not of the rings, but of their bearers. The air grows heavy, thick with the scent of old ink and older secrets. 7 bearers, a union of foes, a reckoning disguised as salvation. The book in his hands hums faintly, its pages rustling as if stirred by an unfelt wind. Some truths, it seems, are too dangerous to be remembered, and too vital to be forgotten. The road to Lothlorien winds like a serpent through the eaves of Fangorn, where the very air hums with the murmur of ancient trees. Gandalf's breath comes quicker now, not from exertion, but from the weight of the riddle gnawing at his thoughts. 3 becomes 7. The words coil around his mind like smoke, refusing to dissipate. Somewhere ahead, beyond the silver-limbed boughs of the golden wood, the Lady of Light keeps vigil, and perhaps the answers he seeks. But the forest is not the only thing watching. The rustle of leaves isn't always the wind, the scuff of boots on moss, the too steady blink of yellow eyes in the undergrowth Sauron spies are closer than Aragorn's suspects. The ranger moves like a shadow at Gandalf's side, his hand never far from his sword. Lothlorien's borders are warded, he murmurs. Even the darkness hesitates there. The wizard's grip tightens around his staff. Wards can fray, light can dim, and Galadriel, for all her power, is not infallible. A memory surfaces unbid in her voice, centuries ago, as they stood beneath the Malorn trees. Some secrets are kept not out of wisdom, but fear. What has she seen in her mirror since then? What has she chosen not to share? A twig snaps behind them. Aragorn whirls, blade half drawn, but the forest is still too still. Gandalf doesn't turn. He knows better than to acknowledge the presence, slithering just beyond sight. Let them watch. Let them report back to their master that the gray pilgrim walks openly, as if he has nothing left to hide. The deception is its own kind of weapon. The first glimpse of the Nimrodal stops them both in their tracks. The river glows as if moonlight has pooled in its waters, though the sun still hangs above the horizon. Its song is softer here, threaded with something older than elvish lament, a whisper of the earth itself, mourning what was lost when the rings were forged. Aragorn kneels, cupping the water in his palms. It remembers, he says, voice thick with something like reverence. Gandalf says nothing. The river remembers, yes. But memory is a two-edged sword. Somewhere in Lothlorien, a truth waits, coiled and patient, and time, like the Nimrodal's current, flows only in one direction, toward a reckoning they may not be ready to face. The trees part ahead, revealing a narrow silver bridge. On the far shore, a figure stands silhouetted against the failing light. No greeting is spoken. None is needed. The lady has been expecting them. The wind howls like a dying thing as Gandalf and Aragorn crash through the underbrush, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Behind them, the Nazgul's shrieks pierce the night, a sound that isn't just heard but felt, scraping against the bones like a blade on stone. Gandalf's staff flickers, its light guttering under the weight of the Black Rider's terror. The golden wood of Lothlorien shimmers in the distance, so close, yet impossibly far. Aragorn stumbles, his boot catching on a root slick with moss, and in that heartbeat of vulnerability, the shadows behind them surge forward, swallowing the path like a tide of ink. Gandalf's fingers tighten around his staff, but the magic that usually answers his call now slips through his grasp like smoke. Desperation coils in his chest. There's no time for spells, no time for cunning, only instinct remains. With a muttered oath, he thrusts the staff skyward, channeling not light, but fire, a single, searing thread of flame that arcs into the night like a falling star. It strikes the crest of a nearby hill, igniting a long dormant beacon with a roar that shakes the earth. The signal blazes against the darkness, a defiance written in flame. For a moment, the Nazgul hesitate, their mounts shying back from the sudden brilliance, but the reprieve is fleeting. Their leader, taller, crowned with rusted spikes, lets out a cry that twists the air itself, and the chase resumes with renewed frenzy. Aragorn drags himself upright, his sword gleaming faintly in the beacon's glow. That won't hold them, he grits out. Gandalf doesn't answer, he knows. The fire wasn't meant to stop them. It was a plea, a cry for the one who has watched these woods since the first shadows crept into the world. And then, like an answered prayer, the wind shifts. The scent of Malorn blossoms floods the air, sweet and suffocating, and the very trees seem to lean inward, their branches knitting together into a living barrier. From the depths of the forest, a voice rings out not in words, but in a melody that hums through the soil, through the roots, through the blood in their veins. The Nazgul recoil as if struck, their shrieks falter, dissolving into something that might be fear. Aragorn exhales sharply. She heard you. Gandalf's shoulders sag, just for a moment, as the first silver leaves of Lothlorien brush against his sleeve. The beacon's light still burns behind them, but ahead, the path is bathed in a glow that has nothing to do with fire. The Lady of Light does not show herself. Not yet, but her presence is everywhere in the whisper of the leaves, in the hush of the wind, in the way the shadows no longer seem quite so hungry. The two travelers step forward, and the forest swallows them whole. The moment Gandalf's boot touches the golden grass of Lothlorien, the air itself changes thick with the scent of blooming Malorn and something far older, a presence that hums along the skin like static before a storm. The trees here don't merely grow, they watch, their silver leaves trembling despite the absence of wind. Ahead, the path twists toward a glade where the light doesn't fall so much as pool, as if the world has tilted to gather it there. And in its center, Galadriel stands waiting, her hair unbound, her eyes reflecting not the present, but countless possible futures. You bring shadows with you, Mithrandir, she says, her voice neither warm nor chiding, but simply aware, as if she's already counted every step of their journey before they took it. Aragorn bows his head, but Gandalf meets her gaze, and for the first time in centuries, he feels the weight of his own years, heavy as a stone in his chest. Shadows follow all who seek the light, he replies, his fingers tightening around his staff. Even here, Galadriel's smile is a fleeting thing, gone before it fully forms. She lifts a hand, and between her fingers, a thread of gold materializes not a ring, but its echo, a shimmering afterimage of power. You come for answers, she murmurs. But answers are not merely given, They are exchanged. The thread trembles, then splits into 3 filaments, each pulsing with a different hue. The 3. Even unspoken, their names hang in the air like a chord struck from some celestial harp. Aragorn shifts uneasily, his hand drifting toward the hilt of his sword, not in threat, but instinct. Galadriel's gaze flicks to him, and something in her expression softens. Fear not, Estel. The blade you carry has no power here. Then to Gandalf, sharper, but yours does. The unspoken accusation stings. Narya's fire burns in his pocket, a constant warmth against his thigh. Has she always known? Of course she has. The golden thread shivers again, and suddenly, it's not just 3 strands, but 7. No, 9 twisting together in a grotesque mockery of harmony. The vision doesn't last. It can't. With a gasp, Galadriel snaps her fingers and the illusion shatters like glass. Sweat beads at her temple, her first visible strain. The riddle is not a lock to be picked, she whispers. It is a mirror, and what you see in it will depend entirely on what you bring. Gandalf exhales slowly, the weight of her words settling into his bones. This is no mere warning. It's a test. To seek the ring's secrets is to dance on the edge of the very precipice Celebrimbor fell from, the line between guardian and claimant, between wisdom and the arrogance of thinking oneself immune to corruption. Galadriel steps closer, her breath cool against his cheek, as she murmurs the last truth, the one that will haunt him long after they leave her woods. The greatest danger is not in failing, Mithrandir. It's in succeeding too well. The water in the mirror of Galadriel doesn't ripple. It breathes, rising and falling like the chest of a sleeping giant. Gandalf's reflection wavers, then dissolves, replaced by images that aren't memories, but possibilities. A white tower, crumbling under a sky choked with smoke. A staff split in 2, its halves weeping embers, and worse, far worse, his own hand, pale and skeletal, clutching a ring that burns with a light too hungry to be pure. The vision shifts again. Minas Tirith's gates buckling, elves fleeing west, and hobbits, oh, the hobbits. Small bodies lying still in the mud of the Shire, their pockets full of uneaten bread. The air leaves his lungs as if punched out. This isn't just failure. It's the cost of arrogance, the path Saruman walked, convinced he could outwit the darkness rather than endure it. Galadriel's voice cuts through the horror, not as a comfort, but as a blade. You fear becoming him, she says, because you know the thirst he drank from. The lie that power can be managed rather than resisted. The mirror's surface darkens, and for a heartbeat, Gandalf sees himself robed in white, standing atop Orthanc, not as prisoner, but as master. The temptation is slick and sweet in his throat. Imagine what you could do with that strength, the lives you could save. Narya's flame flares hot against his finger, as if in warning. Then the cruelest twist of all, Frodo's face, tear-streaked, whispering, you knew all along, and you sent me anyway." The accusation lands like a stone in still water, rippling outward into truth. Of course he knew. The quest was always a gamble, a frail hope balanced on the shoulders of the smallest and kindest, because only they could carry it without breaking or bending. The mirror's visions blur, but the lesson remains, sharp as a splinter. To fight Sauron is to risk becoming him. To refuse that risk is to surrender. Gandalf's knees nearly buckle, For all his centuries of wisdom, he's never felt so terribly, utterly small. And then laughter, his own, ragged and real, bubbling up from some hidden well of relief. The sound startles even him. All this time, he murmurs, "I thought my strength lay in knowing more than others, but it was never about knowing. It was about trusting." The mirror stills, its waters clearing at last to reflect not his fears, but his face weathered, weary, and unmistakably his own. Galadriel's hand brushes his shoulder, lighter than a falling leaf. "The greatest weapons against shadow," she whispers, "are not light or wisdom, but the courage to be fragile." Beyond the glade, a malorn blossom detaches from its branch, drifting downward in slow, spiraling grace. Gandalf watches it fall, and for the first time in an age, he doesn't reach to catch it. The path out of Lothlorien is lined with silver leaves that cling to Gandalf's robe like reluctant farewells. Each step away from the golden wood feels lighter, not because the burden has lifted, but because its weight has shifted, no longer crushing, but purposeful. The lady's words coil in his mind, not as riddles, but as lodestones. Fragility is not weakness. Trust is not surrender. Ahead, the Anduin glitters under the afternoon sun, its currents carving through the land as surely as time itself. Aragorn lingers at the water's edge, his gaze fixed on the distant shadow of the misty mountains. He doesn't ask what Gandalf saw in the mirror. Some truths are too heavy to speak aloud. Instead, the ranger reaches into his cloak and produces a small, cloth-wrapped bundle waybread from the elves, still faintly warm. "They'll expect us to go east," he murmurs, nodding toward the mountains. Toward the high passes, where the shadows are thickest. Gandalf accepts the offering, the scent of honey and crushed almonds, stirring a memory of simpler days. "And you suggest," Aragorn's smile is a blade in the sunlight, south, through the dead marshes. The name alone is enough to make the air taste of rot and old fear. A place where the very ground remembers death. Gandalf turns the idea over in his mind, testing its edges. It's a gamble, a path even orcs avoid, but that, perhaps, is its virtue. Sauron's eye is fixed on the mighty, on towers and fortresses, on kings and wizards. He seldom bothers to glance at the forgotten places, the spaces between. And in that oversight lies their one advantage, the unlikeliness of their hope. The wizard tucks the waybread into his sleeve, his fingers brushing Narya's band. The ring's fire is subdued now, a quiet pulse rather than a blaze. It, too, has learned the value of small things. A breeze stirs the reeds along the riverbank, carrying with it the faintest echo of malorn leaves whispering. A reminder, or maybe a blessing. Gandalf adjusts his hat, casting a long shadow across the grass, not the towering silhouette of a wizard who commands storms, but the crooked shape of a traveler who's learned to walk softly. "Very well," he says at last. "Let us disappoint the mountains." And with that, two figures turn away from the expected path, their footprints vanishing into the marshes, mist as if the earth itself is conspiring to keep their secret. Somewhere ahead, the darkness waits, but for the first time in centuries, Gandalf doesn't hurry to meet it. The light, after all, has always been patient.